Well, unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard by now that there is unrest all across American universities as pro Palestine protesters have taken over multiple campus properties to signify their opposition to Israel. In response to this, House Republicans took it upon themselves to pass a new anti Semitism bill in an effort to show solidarity with Israel. However, the bill is a giant assault upon the First Amendment and may have made parts of the Bible outlawed. On this episode of Forge and Anvil, I will be joined by Bryce Eddy to talk about this awful bill as well as how we should handle these college protests. All this and more, so stick around. Welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out uncomfortable conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. I am a husband, a father, and a follower of Christ Jesus, doing my best to represent him well wherever I can. As I mentioned in the opening, I am joined by my guest, Bryce Eddy, returning guest, actually. But Bryce, go ahead and introduce yourself to those who are not yet familiar with you.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me, Connor. I appreciate it. And by the way, I like that opening, man, because uncomfortable conversations are the kinds that we should be having. So my name is Bryce Eddy, and I have a show on Salem's Podcast Network, brilliantly titled The Bryce Eddy Show. And, we're having fun. We're talking about many of these very same issues. I've got the business and entrepreneurial background and have uh, served in a unique capacity in some security services, and I own a jujitsu school. And I've been getting after it. Kind of fell into this like many people did during the pandemic. And when they started locking us down, I was upset. So I thought that we should talk about it.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you back. And before we get started, for you listening, feel free to go over to forgeandanvil.substack.com. That is our home where I post all of the episodes of the show, as well as some of my original writings, as well as some bonus episodes for those of you who want to throw us a little tip, and we will go ahead and provide that extra content for you. And then, of course, we are live on YouTube, Rumble, and X. So go ahead and repost this stream. Go ahead and share it on any platforms you find yourself on, and be sure to hit the subscribe button, like all those great things that help us out in the algorithm. It really is appreciated. That being said, though, let's go ahead and dive straight in. So, yeah, Bryce, as I originally was reaching out to you, I wanted to have you on to talk about the college protests. And obviously, a lot has been happening there. And then, of course, this new bill that comes passed by House Republicans in Congress. The bill is H.R. 6090. So this bill is horrendous. And before we get into the initial context of the bill, maybe let's go ahead and first unpack some of the college protests. So, Bryce, first and foremost, what was your initial reaction to some of these things as they began to develop when you first saw, these different colleges get their campuses taken over by pro-Palestinian marchers and protesters?
Yeah, well, I thought that the useless idiots got maybe off of the off the reservation, so to speak, because I don't think this has been, as far as protests go, very helpful for the left, for the establishment, for the side. It's come to light that many of Joe Biden's financial supporters were supporting some of these efforts, which we expected. Although at first, because it was so bad for them, I was thinking that it happened a little bit more organically. I'd been embedded and part of witnessing a lot of the Antifa characters during the Summer of Love, the BLM stuff, the George Floyd riots. We'd been part of that as far as a security concern, and actually had people embedded within the protesting groups and witnessed them handing out stacks of cash and directing people on where to go, and brick deliveries and all those sort of things that were reported. So for that, I have a unique view in terms of the manufactured element to these protests. But because it was looking so bad, I was thinking, oh, maybe they decided this one on their own. But it does turn out that many of these folks were being paid. It was being supported and organized by some of Biden's folks. But you notice that they put an end to it pretty quickly now.
Yeah, they did. In fact, you mentioned how it was manufactured, and something that I even saw, I believe it was just today, that it was discovered that there was a woman that was definitely associated in some manner with the CCP. So possible Chinese spies maybe infiltrating these protests to ag things on. So yeah, it's interesting how we see George Soros specifically was kind of of course, he's a boogeyman on the right, but for good reason. He was kind of the main donor of the Biden campaign in recent months, one of the biggest donors, and he's of course been behind a lot of these protests. We see their uniform tents all looking completely identical, as if they all went to the same place to buy these tents. Very convenient. So yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to see that this is manufactured. I think one of the things that I really wanted to discuss with you before we get into talking about HR 6090 is just how we should be responding to these protests. Because, I view this very much with a mindset of this is the left having a left-wing civil war. It's kind of the pro-Israel side and the anti-Israel side, and obviously there are people who are pro-Israel on the right, but we know that here in America, most Jewish Americans are very left-leaning, and they donate and vote accordingly. And then, of course, these colleges are incredibly left-leaning. So it really seemed like the colleges were in a frenzy because of these protests. And my big issue right now is it seems like the right really wants to step in and try to save the left from itself. And I am tempted, based on what I've seen, to just sit back and let the left eat the left. But what's
Yeah.
your take on that?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, when they're in error and they're doing themselves harm, let them continue to do it. I actually am okay with them letting these things go on. You're getting a lot of great footage. I think it was maybe NYU where you had people being interviewed in the crowd, and a couple of those folks there, they had no idea why they were there. And you're seeing that repeated over and over again. These are the brat children of the wealthy. I mean, it costs $78,000 a year, I believe, is the number for to attend Columbia. I mean, these are the wealthy kids. I mean, like Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a wealthy kid, right? So most of these folks, they've got the time and the resources to be involved in nonsense, and that's what we're seeing there. They don't have, many of them, a holistic or a complete view or even completely formed opinions on the situation in Israel. Many of them are shouting chants like from the river to the sea and other things, which are endorsing the idea of wiping Israel off the face of the map. So that's what we're getting. Let them continue to embarrass themselves. Don't intervene too early. But I think why they've intervened is somebody made a phone call and said, all right, this has got to stop. This is making us look bad on the left. So clearly that's why it seemed to be orchestrated that almost overnight they broke these things up.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned how they're manufactured, and you thought maybe it wasn't manufactured just because of how bad this ended up being from the left. And I really think the progressive wing of the left is kind of like the One Ring. You want to use it for good, but you can't actually control it. And I think that the left oftentimes trots out their most radical elements in order to try to stir up the population to vote Democrat, and sometimes it works, like we saw in 2020. And I think in this case, they tried to use the ring, and it started consuming them. And so someone made a call, like you said, and that's one of the things that I've been really frustrated. And I know many have been vocalizing this as well. Is we've seen anti-white rhetoric from these colleges for decades now. And then it seems like the moment these colleges started showing signs of a uprising against Jewish Americans and Israel, that was immediately cause for those who claim to represent us to crack down on it. And of course, that's caused a lot of real animosity towards Jewish Americans and towards Israel. As far as where I fall on the whole Israel thing, I've been fairly quiet on Israel Palestine, mostly because I just don't know that much about the foreign conflict. I don't want to weigh into something as big as foreign affairs, uneducated. I think too many people want to dive straight into that, and they end up embarrassing themselves. But I know that there are people, well-meaning people that think we have to be completely out of it, well-meaning people that think we have to give every last dollar to Israel. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where I think Israel should not be on our payroll, but we don't necessarily have to, wish them to actually be, we don't want to wish the Palestinian side to have their way with them either. So I'm fairly in the middle on that issue in particular. But all that to say, it's frustrating to many individuals like me who are sort of, just don't have a strong opinion about it, to see Congress act immediately overnight to defend the colleges from anti-Israel protests, and of course governors like Greg Abbott and others sending in the National Guard and police officers to break up these protests. So, what's your take on governors immediately jumping in this circumstance, which I'm not even saying is wrong? What I'm saying is it's selective. It's selective enforcement, while there's been this anti-white rhetoric on college campuses for decades, going back as late as at least the 60s.
Yeah, well, at first, I want to commend you on not taking an aggressive position until you know what you're talking about. I mean, that's admirable, because many pundits, many folks that are out there are just knuckleheads on the street, are adopting positions that might be a tribal position. Whoever they identify with, this is the way it is, right? Without actually thinking it through. So I commend you for that. That's wise. That's responsible. Um, in regards to the actual governors and their responses, I'm okay with a varied response in different states, right? We're seeing a contrast between the red states like Texas and like Florida. We're seeing what the blue states are doing, like New York, and we're getting a contrast or evidence of what is good governance and what is not. I think the Florida universities did a very good job. They said, "Hey, you're welcome to protest, right? That is American way, right? We want that. We want free speech, but here are the rules." And their rules were very clear. Their rules were very even-handed. This is your responsibility. If you don't do this, here are the penalties, and that's fair. And so that I thought was awesome, and we saw that. You then saw, and I don't think Governor Abbott did it very well in his speech, because he did make it about anti-Semitism and hate and things like that. And we don't want to play that game on the right. I'm not interested in banning speech of any kind. I want more speech to be out there, and the cure for bad speech is better speech, right? Let's let it all hang out there. Suppressing people and suppressing points of view is ultimately an evil that will grow a very, very dark seed for us. So, have at it. You want to say terrible things about a class of people, go for it. I really don't care. Let's oppose you in the public square, and let's do it brilliantly. Let's point out what an idiot you are by very eloquent and powerful speeches in opposition.
Right. And I think the thing that is so frustrating to many individuals like me on the right is that we hear our party try to reject identity politics and defend free speech all the way up until it's inconvenient. Suddenly we want to play identity politics to do whatever we can to defend Jewish Americans, which again, I'm not even saying is wrong. I'm saying it boils down to why do you not have the equal vigor to defend your white constituents?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, white racism is just as illegal as and anti-Semitism, a true discrimination. Now, of course, we know Christopher Caldwell wrote a great book. I'm sure you've read it, Age of Entitlement. And he essentially makes the argument that the civil rights laws, whether there was good intentions behind them or not, essentially replace the Constitution and is basically the law of the land today. But under the civil rights, white Americans have the same protection as black Americans, supposedly, but that's not how it ends up actually working in practice. And that's a lot of the issues I have with HR 6090 in a moment. But I think that's what it's ultimately doing, is it's truly making people, whether you were for Israel or against it from the get-go, if you were somewhere in the middle, it's going to only cause those people in the middle to be against Israel, I think, when they see their own representatives selectively defend Israel but not defend them. And it boils down to the Republican Party needs to actually have unwavering principles that we actually hold ourselves to.
Yeah.
Because the more we're selective about it, it causes more animosity. And maybe that's even the point, which is where, in my mind, I see these actions and I think uniparty is just what comes to my mind when I see all these, whenever something's bipartisan, to defend a certain thing, it always is going to make you think uniparty. And it's unfortunate that they did it in such a ethnicity based way.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think that the problem with us being selective on all these things have led to, actual, racist policies against white folks now, which to me is absurd at the end of the day. I mean, the fact that we're arguing over melanin content in one's skin, and we're ranking people on that, it's so dumb. I mean, because what is
Right.
white anyway? Right? Quote unquote white. I mean, I think really what it is there's a pushback against Western culture is what it really ultimately is, and we're seeing the growing animosity towards what Western culture has created. People want to tear down the existing system, which is kind of the big brother culture that put it together. They want to tear down the existing system because they want to replace it with their own. And Western culture, which includes something for everyone, it may have been, originated in Greece and under Judeo-Christian values that caused the West to be so successful, but its good ideas in the marketplace reign supreme. We did a good job organizing things, and we organized it for all of us, regardless of whatever your color is. I'm all down with celebrating cultures. Let's be about the marketplace in that regard. There's a reason we all love tacos. It is a great food, right? Good ideas reign supreme. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's blue jeans or other inventions. Whatever happens in a marketplace, if you let it go and you let the natural effect of good ideas rising to the top, it will. And Western culture is what allowed that. So it's a stupid idea, really, to even make any of this stuff about race. The reason they're getting all twisted up in regards to Israel and coming to the defense of the Jews is because of the Holocaust, because of all of that narrative over time, all of that history over time. It's like, oh, now we got to do something, and we should be doing something no matter who is under attack. And I'm a unrepentant supporter of Israel. I am a very consistent supporter of Israel and their right to exist. I have a very strong track record in that. But I also, at the same time, do not believe we should be sending our tax dollars over there. I think there's ways that we could support them without doing these massive bills that end up becoming money laundering schemes and make a whole bunch of people wealthy and a whole bunch of businesses wealthy in the process. That's evil, whether it's the Ukraine or Israel. Israel can fight on their own, by the way. They're very robust. They have a lot of strength. They have a lot of resources, partly because of, what we did to help them.
Right.
I'm uncomfortable with the folks that are going to put Israel ahead of America, because we need to be America first. If we aren't strong, we will cease to exist as a power on the world stage, and we will cease to exist as a moral good in this universe. And that's where we're failing ourselves. It's put your emergency mask on first before you put it on somebody else. We need to be the ones that hold to that standard. So, I think it really is a very reactive thing for a lot of these politicians to, go ahead and be, writing and promoting these bills.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And we'll kind of use that to transition to talk about the bill now, HR 6090. So it is dubbed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. So, the intentions behind this bill may have been good, but to be honest, this is just a prime example of showing why Congress, when they vote on stuff without reading it, um, they end up just
Which is
looking so
which is
foolish.
every day, by the way, which is every day. That's the unfortunate,
Exactly.
terrible thing is they rely upon their staffers, and they rely on these clever titles, and they rely on, "Okay, who's with me on this one? Oh, okay," and then they whip up support. I love that you have Thomas Massey here up on the screen. Thomas Massey is one of the true guys that are original thinkers, standing on principle. I mean, unfortunately, I can count the number of guys that are like him on one hand.
I agreed, and unfortunately, I don't know how many numbers, how much that number is going to grow in the coming years. Hopefully, we'll see some positive fruit of that if God is willing to bless us with more Thomas Masseys in Congress. But this is Thomas Massey talking about the bill. So one of the reasons why the bill is so atrocious is because the bill specifically is outlawing anti-Semitism, but it uses an example of well, let me rephrase that. It outsources the definition of anti-Semitism to a group called the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, also called IHRA. So the IHRA has 35 member countries and 8 observer countries. So essentially, this bill already starts off by outsourcing the language that we are going to define our laws by to a third party that is a completely unaccountable to the American voter. And so then we go to the site, and this is what I have Massey's tweet up here. He is posting quotes from the site of what they say defines anti-Semitism. So here's some of the issues with it. Here's one of the first ones: calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. I think everyone would say, okay, sure, yeah,
Yeah, but
obviously.
that's
And
already illegal.
exactly. That was just what I was going to say. It's already illegal. So why did we have to make this? Well, we're stating the obvious because we have to then expand it after we state the obvious. So here's some other things that they mentioned: accusing Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations. So the reason why this is such an issue is because this immediately is saying that you cannot criticize someone. Like let's say that there was someone, this has happened, by the way. Let's say there was someone from Israel that was spying on American intelligence agencies for the state of Israel for nefarious purposes. I'm not saying that happens often, but if it was, you wouldn't even be able to talk about it in this instance if this bill were to become law. So we need to have the right to be able to criticize a foreign government. And the fact that they want to limit speech, which already is breaking First Amendment, but to do so on behalf of a foreign government is horrendous. It's
Yeah.
absolutely ridiculous.
No, I mean, it's honestly terrible because you should be, as an American citizen or American politician, you should be able to question somebody as to what their loyalties are. I mean, that makes perfect sense, and there are people that will, put their nations or nations of origin first. Yeah, Ilhan Omar is one of those people, and we should be able to question her about that, and we should be able to push back on that. We should be able to, get rid of her from our legislative bodies based on those sort of things. None of us should be traitorous to the United States, and if
Right.
we suspect or are concerned about that, we should be able to have that line of questioning. And I'm not accusing anyone in particular of that. And I'm not suggesting that, anybody in our Congress or in our government are right now, but maybe. And we should be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. But this bill would make that near impossible. So here's some of the other ones that I think it's important to talk about. One of the other things that it mentions is, let me see here. It says drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Of course, Nazi comparisons are overused, whether we like it or not. Though it is the mythology of our country. And as a result, everyone is constantly going to accuse everyone of being a Nazi at some point if you disagree with me. That's just the rules of the internet.
Yeah.
But one of the things that it mentions right down here further on, I'm using not the B, by the way, for those who are just listening audio, because they've kind of put everything in one neat article. So it made it real easy for me to pull up some of the key points that I wanted to go over. But one of the other definitions of anti-Semitism is claims of Jews killing Jesus. So this is where, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is the slippery slope that would make it near impossible to talk about some of the biblical passages that we
Yeah.
see in the New Testament. Just talking about historically what happened leading up to the crucifixion of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Now,
there's 3 or 4 of them that that we could probably bring up. But yeah, no, I mean that's absurd. And on all of these things, I mean, the reason that I want our government to be limited is because every single one of these things will be at some point used against us. Every law, every regulation, everything that we pass is ultimately backed by a government gun. So, it behooves us, and it is very wise for us not to have as many things as possible, written up as far as legislation.
exactly. And I think one of the things that people like to use to dismiss concerns that people like you and I have is they'll say, this isn't going to do anything. You're not going to find, people getting drug away in cop cars over saying these anti-Semitic things, next Thursday. And we're not necessarily talking about next Thursday. Prime example: Douglas Mackey, the guy who's facing prison time for memes. He was convicted under a law that was originally used to prosecute KKK members.
Yeah.
And then Paul Vaughn and so many others that are facing jail under the FACE Act. The FACE Act was enacted under Clinton's administration, and we did not see anyone prosecuted under it until the Joe Biden administration. And I mean, I was born underneath the Clinton administration. That gives you an idea of how long it's been. I mean, so when you think about it from that standpoint, we've had multiple decades where this law was available to use, and suddenly it now gets abused decades later. The moment someone thinks that they might be able to use this for political power, so it's just the idea that the more laws, the less freedom, and that's something that we need to be aware of, especially when it comes to something as sacred as Holy Scriptures.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. I could not agree more. Yeah. No, our solutions to these sort of things are not bills. These things are, made to virtue signal. It probably won't make it through the Senate, but it's one of those things to be like, I stood for Israel. I'm against anti-Semitism. Look at me, I'm a hero. And the truth is, no, you're an idiot and an absolute reprobate for going against our free speech. And so far we've seen under Speaker Johnson, we've seen attacks on the Fourth Amendment and this now. And what's next? These guys will continue on to trample on our Constitution.
Right. Rusty Musket over here on Rumble joined in with a chat, and he said, "You are both totally missing the point. You are both conflating race into what is the murder of innocent non-combatants who are walled up by an oppressive regime." Want to respond to that, Bryce?
Well, we haven't talked about that part of this. I mean, if we want to talk about what's happening, I mean, look, I'm gonna upset this guy. What's his name there? I'm gonna piss him off because I believe that we need to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. They're a terrorist organization, and they're hiding behind their people. And the truth is that they are the ones that are giving us these numbers. These numbers in terms of who's died and how many children have died. All that stuff is fake and false. There's propaganda on both sides. And don't tell me that we don't in war have casualties and innocents die. In order to end Hitler's reign, we killed 2 million Germans that were innocent, or at least not a part of the military war effort necessarily. That is the reality and the harsh, cold, wicked reality of war. That's why we should be against it, other than circumstances like this. But I would ask that writer what he would suggest we do otherwise, because if Israel says, okay, we're going to lay down our weapons and we're not going to do this, it's not as if Hamas's goal is going to change and all of a sudden they're going to have a peace posture towards Israel. It's been multiple times that we worked on many different solutions to that, many different peace attempts. No, these are people that want Israel to cease to exist, and that is their aim. That is their goal. They are there to antagonize, and that's the truth. Should we hold Israel accountable? Absolutely. Should we demand that they do everything in their power not to kill the innocent? Absolutely. But it's a child's thought and idea that innocent people aren't going to die in war.
Hmm. Well, unfortunately, that is just one of the realities of the fallen world, that there's always going to be innocent blood in these conflicts. I think as far as my take on it, and again, I try not to weigh into these things, with my ignorance, but I would say that for my part, I just view it like Israel can do what they want. They're their own country. Just don't make me pay for it. And I don't mean that as a very isolationist answer. I mean that as being a non-interventionist. I think that American intervention should happen on very, very, very rare occasions. And the actual criteria for what that looks like needs to be very high. So, like when you say, Bryce, that you say, we should wipe out Hamas, I would say Israel can if they want, but I don't think
Yeah.
America should be involved unless Hamas does something directly to us, and of course, that we don't want to encourage
Yeah. No, that's fair.
a false
That's
flag or something
yeah.
like
No,
that. But
that's fair. And you're right. Israel should. Okay. Now, when I say we are on the side of good, and and Hamas is on the side of evil. Their declarations are evil. They have in their charter, they have evil aims, and Israel is our ally. We do not need to send them a boatload of cash in order to do this, but we can be on their team from a moral standpoint, and we can lend a posture to them of, hey, we got your back, without and by the way, that's very, very necessary when you have actors like Iran and all these others that are using these poor innocent Palestinians in order to gin up war against Israel. I mean, this is more complicated than poor little babies over there being killed. That's sad. That sucks. That's evil. That's wicked. But they want to get reductive on these things down to these simplistic ideas, and that's just not the reality.
Hmm. So what's your take then, Bryce? Shara Joel actually just threw out a comment on YouTube as well. She said, I just got here, but I agree America should not be the world's police. And, I agree with that. Obviously, there's a time and a place. Again, non-interventionist, which means it's not isolationist. It's close to isolationist, but it means we would intervene, in very specific circumstances, but that needs to be very steep again. What's your thought in general for why you believe that the U.S. should support Israel? Because one of the things that I am frustrated with the dialogue right now is that people like me who are not super educated on the history of the decades, if not centuries, of conflict, in the Middle East. We can't ask questions without being accused of being pro one side or the other.
Right.
But one thing that I have been frustrated with is I don't see too many good arguments, with one exception, for why Israel is such a crucial ally to us. The main thing that I do see that is a good argument, this is the one exception, is the fact that Israel gives us access to historical biblical sites. I appreciate that argument. I want to have access to be able to go to the Holy Land and to actually see where my Messiah walked, and to actually take part in that biblical history. And the parts that are not controlled by Israel are not necessarily places that we can travel.
Yeah,
So
we can't go into Bethlehem. I mean,
right.
because it's not controlled by Israel. No, I mean that. Look, there is a very dangerous fight brewing in the world right now, with the rise and meteoric growth of Islam around the world. And the reality I'm going to have on my show here in a couple of days, the experts, one in particular has written several books on this, at the National Center for Security Policy, and which is Frank Gaffney's. He was the original founder during the Reagan administration. They're a think tank. Do not accept any government funding, but they go and they research and they spend time on these very difficult subjects, and they lay out these threats. And I would encourage the audience to listen to that. I'll be releasing that episode in the next week or so here. But the truth is that we do need to support democracies that share as many of our values as possible, around the world. And we, in failing to do that, we put ourselves at danger. Now, that's very different than being a massive interventionist, which I am not. I believe that we can hold them accountable. I believe that we as a country need to join forces with our other other democracies around the world, and everybody needs to contribute. That's one thing I did like about Donald Trump. Among some other things, that he was like, "No, you're going to pay your share of this stuff." I mean, there were tons of nation states that owed us a lot of money for support that they were supposed to be engaging in, and we were continuously footing the bill. And no, let's go Dutch on a few of these things, guys. But other than that, I mean, there is a biblical level mandate for us to support the Jewish people. If you are a Christian, the story is not complete on the Jewish people, and that's a part of our discipling of nations and a part of our evangelical mandate. So and it says in the Bible that we will be blessed, if we bless Israel. So I'm down with that. And again, that's very different than us sending billions of unaccountable dollars over to them.
Hmm. And I think that is the thing that's is a real frustration with a lot of my audience. I have people on from all walks of theological perspectives. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume you'd consider yourself more to be dispensational in your theology. Would that be a fair
Well,
categorization?
no, not really, and I avoid a lot of those
Hmm.
labels. But no, I would not say that.
They definitely muddy the water, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But either way, the more premillennial understanding of what's going to happen to Israel in the last days, I think the idea of bless Israel and you will be blessed. Um, I for my part, I'm not yet convinced that that's not necessarily a more of a Old Testament idea that Israel is now the church. Those who partake in Christ. I think Romans does a pretty good job of laying out the idea that we are all engrafted, into the family of believers, and as a result, you could make the argument that the church is now Israel. And I believe that's how I would view those passages. Theologically, but either way, I don't necessarily begrudge anyone who doesn't fully see it that way. I think the issue that my audience tends to have is just that you don't fall into this camp by what you said, but there are many people who do take that passage of bless Israel and you will be blessed to say that we do have to bleed our country absolutely dry on behalf of Israel. And I think that's what's helping to cause animosity even from Christian individuals who are witnessing these events unfold. We feel like our politicians will send all of our money over to Israel while we can't even afford our own lifestyles here in the
yeah.
US. And so I think that's just brooding a lot of animosity.
Yeah, and I don't blame people for being irritated by that, because it's unconscionable the amount of money that we waste, and we do not have that responsibility. And I do not think that is the biblical mandate there is to give them our last cent and not feed our own families. And so I understand people's frustration there, and I share it. I mean, I hate the idea of how much money has gone to foreign nations with very little accountability. And Israel is on that list, although I would put Ukraine much higher on that list
That's what yeah.
because there is at least some accountability for how that money gets spent in Israel. I mean, we can account for a lot more. But no, I mean, we are feeding the war industrial complex. We are enriching politicians every time we're doing those things, and I'm not down with that. And I want to see us give support in other ways, but they can fight, and they've got the resources to do it. They're a very wealthy country.
Hmm. Yeah. I got another comment here from Rusty Musket over on Rumble. He's not happy with our answers, which is, it's fine. I mean, we welcome disagreement here. He did say, he said, you can't go into Bethlehem. Why? It is mostly Christian Arabs, but you are blocked by Israel. Are you very familiar with that, Bryce? Because again, this is an area where I have ignorance on, but I know that you've definitely had a lot of conversations pertaining to this. So, I mean, let me know if you
I've had
speak to that.
some. I do not know the intricacies of all of that there of where you can and cannot go. I do know Bethlehem is one of those examples, but it is being controlled not by Israel, but by the opposition, and so as a result, Israel is very friendly to us in regards to our holy sites and our areas, and very supportive. But hey, maybe he's been to Bethlehem.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, that's something that I'll have to look into more because I want to continue to grow in this area to understand better. So, forgive my ignorance, audience, but we all have a little bit more homework to do, as it seems. But
Yeah.
so
I was set to go to Israel during the pandemic, and it got shut down on me. So that's still on my bucket list.
yeah, there's a learning opportunity wasted, unfortunately. So, just
Great.
another thing wasted due to COVID. Yeah, well, in our final minutes here, Bryce, do you have any predictions as to whether or not you think HR 6090 that it will go through the Senate and pass?
You know what? There's some inside word that it's going to fail in the Senate, and I've got some friends of mine that are calling for it to fail in the House, understanding what it's really about. And we've got some very powerful people, hitting the phones even tonight to say that this thing is a disaster and an attack on free speech, which it is.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it might not even get that far. I mean, again, we get some powerful people making some phone calls and stirring people up on this, and we've got a lot of vocal opposition, in the podcast world, and we've got a lot of people that are raising the alarm. It's not a good idea.
Yeah. I really hope that it gets through because this bill's horrendous, and I'm sure Biden will sign it first thing if it gets to his desk. And the unfortunate thing about the optics of this in the first place is, we passed this Anti-Semitism Awareness Act that it really is just attacking the First Amendment. So now,
Yeah.
ultimately, if this doesn't pass, the Republicans look like they didn't do anything about, discrimination. That's going to be the narrative from the left.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
that's why it was foolish from the beginning. I mean, it's
right,
absolutely foolish from the very start. I mean, we do more unforced errors than they do on the left. We're
right.
I think it was Dennis Prager that said, there's the evil party and the stupid party, and I'm a member of the stupid party."
Yeah, yeah, as we all are, or at least as we are all forced to find ourselves. But
They
well,
are the uniparty, and we're seeing that work in real time all the time.
unfortunately, well, Bryce, I appreciate you joining me for this challenging conversation. Where can people go to find you and keep up with everything that you're doing?
Yeah, so the Bryce Eddy Show, we are on Rumble. We got kicked off of YouTube multiple times, so it doesn't work there. I called Fauci a fraud, I think, and that got me in trouble.
Mm.
We can be found on the Super Bryce Eddy Show on Instagram, or Super Bryce Eddy on Instagram if you want my personal, and then Bryce Eddy 1 on Twitter, the artist formerly known as Twitter. I'm so sorry. X.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Bryce. And thank you, listener. If you enjoyed what you listened to and you want to see more, go ahead and go to forgeandanvil.substack.com. All the episodes are on that Substack, as well as writings from yours truly. So feel free to go over there. You can sign up for free with your email to get everything sent to your email as it releases. And then, of course, you can pay a little extra if you want to get some additional content and support the show. Either way, we appreciate you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.